This is Rachel Bixel, Danica Christensen, and Andrew Oborn, and we're covering Chapter 11, Enable and Practice Continuous Integration. In this presentation, we'll discuss why we need continuous integration, how HP LaserJet firmware implemented continuous integration, why we should use small batches over large batches in development, trunk-based practices for continuous integration, and lastly, the Bazaar-Voice case study. Problems occur the longer developers work in their branches in isolation. It becomes increasingly difficult to integrate all the branches back into the trunk or mainline. Integration problems can cause a lot of rework, manual merges, and merges that break automated tests. Using integration was done at the end of the project, so corners usually had to be cut when integration problems took longer to resolve. With all these problems, merging becomes hard, and because of this, merging is done less often, which leads to even more problems down the road. This is why continuous integration is needed. A great example of the problems continuous integration can solve can be seen at HP LaserJet firmware. Gary Groover was the director of engineering at the time. Even though they had a team of 400 developers, they could never seem to get all the features the company wanted out. They only completed 2 firmwares a year. Groover estimated they only spent about 5% of their time on new features. The rest of the time was spent on non-productive work that contributed to their technical debt. Groover and his team set goals to improve their situation. Their goals included the use of continuous integration and trunk development, investing in test automation, creation of hardware simulators, reproduction of test failures on developers' workstations, and new architecture to run all printers off common build and release. Over 4 years, they got all developers working in a common workspace and used trunk-based development. They created a continuous integration system that had all firmware builds automatically tested. These automated testing allowed developers to quickly confirm that their code actually worked. They eventually got 10 to 15 builds a day, over 100 commits a day, 75 to 100,000 add and changes of code, and reduced regression test times from 6 weeks to 1 day. This also increased time working on new features to 40%, decreased development costs, and increased programs in development by about 140%. Groover's experience showed that continuous integration is one of the most critical practices to enable a fast value stream.
When development teams work in long-lived private branches, which means they only merge back to the trunk seemingly at random or infrequently, this results in large batch sizes. When changes need to be made or changes cause failure, chaos will often result and cause major setbacks for all teams working on the project. As was mentioned in the previous slide, HP had a very large team working towards firmware updates. Since the team worked with large batches, they were terribly inefficient, and there was a lot of wasted time. Working with small batches also avoids time-consuming reworking of the code. When there are lots of hands touching the project, each hand has the ability to cause a problem or disruption. And we also avoid technical debt, as was mentioned in the previous slide in the HP example. To solve these issues, work can be done in a trunk-based development process. Developers check their code to the trunk at least daily. This reduces batch sizes, and when batch sizes are small, it is easier to locate and fix errors with little disruption to other developers. Additionally, since testing is done so frequently, automated testing can be completed on the system as a whole. The deployment pipeline can also be configured to reject any changes to the code that will take the project out of a deployable state, further reducing error checking. This is called gated commits. Since the work is broken into smaller portions and error checking is done quickly, accurately, and autonomously, this will lead to better overall quality and faster lead times. It will also eliminate any separate testing or stabilization processing or phases, since this was completed multiple times throughout the project.
Another example of continuous integration can be found in the corporation Bazaar-Voice. Bazaar-Voice, a supplier of customer-generated content for companies like Best Buy, Nike, and Walmart, wanted to change their development and release process in 2012. The company had $120 million in revenue and nearly 5 million lines of code across 15,000 files, with code dating back as far as 2006. They also used several cloud services and 1,200 servers across 4 data centers. They had already started implementing agile development processes, which had reduced development intervals to 2 weeks. Seeing this success, they wanted further improvement and decided to focus on production releases. With a production release schedule of 10 days, they wished to increase release frequencies while reducing release time. To achieve this goal, they began to decouple their monolithic application into microservices and eventually attempted a 2-week release schedule in January of 2012. This attempt failed, however, creating huge issues for everyone involved, including customers. For their second attempt, a bi-weekly release goal was put forward. To avoid the previous mistakes, they corrected some main issues. First, they enabled faster testing by writing and implementing automated testing suites, allowing for continuous integration. They then began using a trunk branch release model, creating a new dedicated release branch every 2 weeks. These release branches stopped new commits except in emergencies, which greatly reduced problems during release. This had dramatic results. In April of 2012, just 3 months after their first failed attempt, their release goals were met with 0 customer incidents. From there, they made a successful and painless transition to weekly releases. They further improved their work by reducing testing time from 3+ hours to less than an hour, and moved to a full continuous delivery model with fast one-click deployments. In this presentation, we talked about the importance of continuous integration and problems that occur when integration is not continuous, Gary Groover's experience with continuous integration and trunk-based development at HP's LaserJet firmware, small batch development and how it is more effective than large batch development, trunk-based development practices such as checking code into the trunk daily, and Bazaar Voice's use of continuous integration in their production releases.